Hello everybody and welcome to another whiskey comparison video. I am Drew Hanish. Happy Zayazi. Zayazi is summer solstice in Japan, and one of the whiskeys that I am tasting today actually celebrates the 24 seasons. Zayazi is the 10th season. Celebrates the 24 seasons in Japan with the 24 ridges that it has around its bottle, and that is Japanese Harmony from Hibiki. It's a Suntory whiskey, and we're going to try that one and also try one that I've had in my collection for some time, the Nikka Coffey grain whiskey. And I hear some of you right now going, because I've heard this before, ooh, a whiskey infused with coffee. What is that going to be like? Nope, spelled a little differently. Coffee being Aeneas Coffey, the man who came up with the column still concept. Actually, he wasn't the first one to come up with the column still, but his was the one that really took off. He was an Irishman, and in the 1920s he came up with that, and that is what a lot of distilleries use now to make whiskey. They look like a big tall flute, and they have little shelves in them, and they allow the vapors to go up through, and as the liquid comes back down past it, it just continuously runs. Unlike a pot still where you have to run everything through by batch, and it's just a slower process. So the idea of the coffee still was to really meet the demand and create a still that could continuously run and produce a lot of spirits. So usually when you're doing a malt whiskey, like a single malt, you're going to do it in a pot still because that pot still shape is going to have a lot of influence on the flavor. Whereas a column still, there is no, it's just a very basic shape. And so with that very basic shape, you're going to be running more grain whiskeys through there and more, mash bill type thing where you have multiple types of grain going in one particular run. So we're going to do the Hibiki Japanese Harmony versus this coffee grain from Nikka, and they are two very different whiskeys. I'll get it out properly here in a moment. What's interesting about this one is that while this bottle runs around $80, you're actually going to get the same exact mash bill as you get out of this Mellow Corn, which comes from Heaven Hill, and this one has a price tag, as you can see there, of $14.95. This is bottled in bond. This is a 4-year whiskey. It is 95% corn, 5% malted barley. George Dickel isn't very far off from that. It's a very heavy corn-influenced whiskey as well. So is this the Japanese bourbon that we're looking at here? Well, I've heard people say that, but there's something very different about this whiskey. Something that creates a less bourbon kind of a characteristic to it. Now, I've heard people talking about notes of vanilla and caramel in this, but I don't really get that as much as everybody else seems to. I get some floral and some baking spice in this. I get a nuttiness, and then I get the only thing I can call it is a Japanese note, because there's something between all of, and I have very limited experience with Japanese whiskey, but the ones that I've tried so far all have this familiar aroma to them, and it comes through on the palate also, that I can't name, and I can't name it because it's just not a smell I have experience with, and so yeah, there's definitely some baking spices in there and some oak characteristics. It's got a floral scent to it as well. One of these days I'm going to really work on my floral get my nose to understand that a little bit deeper so that I can go beyond the floral, because that's one thing I need to work on. Give it a taste. Mm-hmm. I've had this before. It's juicy. It does have a lot of juice characteristics. I get canned peaches in this. It's not sickly sweet, but it is sweet. But then you get this really interesting flavor. And I want to say that it reminds me of mesquite flavored barbecue potato chips. It's a flavor I never thought that I would taste in the whiskey. There's a little chocolate in there too. I think the thing that gets me on this whiskey is that at the end, it tends to go into this bitter orange rind meets char, wood char, and it's the only thing that's not really refined about the flavor of this whiskey is the finish. And unfortunately, the finish is what you experience the longest. But it doesn't last forever. It does go away after a bit. But really, the pleasure in this whiskey comes right there in the middle, and then you get that corn chip, that potato chip. I'm sorry, and that mesquite flavored barbecue potato chip. It's a really interesting note in this whiskey. Wow. There's a nice sweetness to it. There's a little alcohol to it as well. This is 43% alcohol, but it's not overly aggressive. It's just slightly there on the palate. But it's bursting with flavor as it goes through the palate. But as it comes to the end, it's kind of like, yeah, not my favorite landing. It's okay. It's okay. So at 43%, give you some of the other details on this. Sorry, this is 45%. This one's at 45%. And I mean, on the color scale, on the Walker scale, I'm going to say that's probably somewhere between a -2 and a -1. But they actually color this, so I have read. And they also color this. Non-age statement. Not sure on the age on this, but I've read that this is between 8 to 12 years. What's in this bottle is most likely between 8 to 12 years, but they could put something much younger in there and they'd be well within their rights, because apparently Japanese whiskey has no rules. So whereas Scotch has to be 3 years and a day and it has to come from Scotland, and bourbon has to be, whether it's straight whether you go straight bourbon or you go the rules of bourbon, there are age requirements for not for bourbon, but there are for straight bourbon. There are no rules here, and in fact, it's possible for them to use something that isn't even Japanese whiskey in these bottles and still have the name Japanese on the bottle. So again, a lot of things I need to learn about Japanese whiskey. Is it worth the price that you pay? Is it worth paying $80 for this versus $15 for that Mellow Corn? Well, that's up to you. I feel like this is something worth trying, but this is actually used in blends in Japan. So they see it as a component of other things, but it is also regarded as something that can stand alone. So up to you. But for me, it's a good whiskey. Will I buy another bottle? And I think that's the tale is in whether you're going to buy it again or not. I don't think I will, honestly. It's good, but it doesn't blow me away. I'm sure I can find something to put in my cabinet that will be well above that. Oh, wow. I got like a cinnamon sticky bun there. fruit. Definitely heavy on the fruit on the nose. This one is much more fragrant on the fruity. There's some baking spice in there too. I want to say there's some clove, a little bit of raisin as well. But man, there's a really nice sweetness that comes with this whiskey. Maybe more of the mouthfeel, but everybody's talking about the caramel and vanilla in this. I probably get it more out of this. Um, there's a little of that bitterness in there, some of that little orange rind that comes through here. This is definitely a very fruity whiskey. When I first tried this, before I had it, I drank Westland American Stout, which is a young single malt whiskey from Oregon. And I swear, it's what you drink before something that sometimes can have a big impact on what your opinion of that whiskey is. And I thought, for a similar price, this runs about 90 now, but I was seeing it at 75, I think, at that time. And the American whiskey was the same price. And to be honest with you, I would take this every day of the week because it had a much more refined flavor when I put them side by side, front to back. Now, after trying it against the Nikka Coffey grain, yes, definitely a lot lighter flavor, a lot more on the floral. That really stands out, and the fruitiness of this really stands out. There's still some pepper in the palate. There's still that orange rind, but there's also a honey kind of flavor that comes through, and then when you get to the finish, it's not as harsh as this one is. This one on the finish to me sort of disappoints a little bit, and is probably the reason why I would not buy another bottle of it. This one on the finish, it goes to the pepperiness, but it doesn't. But the fruitiness is still there to a certain extent, and that's just a really nice whiskey. It's a very interesting whiskey. There's a lot going on. This is very, I don't want to say one-dimensional, but there's not a lot going on there. This feels like you could go and really seek out a lot of different flavors, and each time you have it, you're going to come up with something different in this one. This is actually a mixture of a blend. This is not a blend. This is a blend. But this is one of those interesting cases where I would take the blend over the whiskey that is unblended, simply because of the refined character of this. This actually has Mizunara. I'm going to learn how to pronounce that. Mizunara oak, which is an extremely expensive oak. You have bourbon barrels, which in Europe will cost, in Scotland will cost around £100, £1,000 for a European oak sherry cask, and these jump up above that in price. They're very rare casks, and so and very sought after casks. But you're going to pay a premium if you have a whiskey that utilizes that particular cask. And this one does for a portion of it. It also has European oak and it also has American oak in it. So it's a very interesting blend. And honestly, you guys voted this one 70 to 30% over the coffee grain. And I agree 100%. Ooh, this is really nice on the nose. Plus the bottle. I mean, it's just a really nice bottle as well. So you get the whole package there. So leave your comments. Love to hear what you guys think. And what, again, 70 to 30%. I think we agree on that one.